An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6, Chapter 71, A Lion's Plot. Oh boy. Meals were a communal affair in the citadel for the various maesters and those in training. Samuel Tarly, the designated representative of the Emperor and Empress of the Targaryen Empire, was exempt from this requirement, while Gilly, seeking refuge from the insulting prejudice of her being a wildling, took advantage of this. Sam did not. He enjoyed eating with the other maesters, mining them for knowledge of this and that. Today, however, neither curiosity nor hunger had brought him into the mess hall. Elation over his friend's victory at Highgarden and morphed into a sense of worry over the kidnapping of the Empress. He had been the one to examine Dany and tell her that she was pregnant, and now both she and Sansa were in the clutches of the Chimera himself. Even with Gilly and little Sam to comfort him, he threw himself into his work, cataloguing everything he could on the White Walkers and the Long Night. At this point, the most important factor would be defeating Joffrey, recapturing Dragonstone, and resuming massive dragonglass mining for the war effort. But something had caught his eye. One that had before, but with the sheer volume of texts at his disposal, the curiosity was only heightened. Gingerly squeezing between the narrow spaces between the various tables and benches, ignoring the mocking stares of many of the younger and even older maesters, Sam finally reached the head table of Archmaester Ambrose. 3 rather thick volumes balanced in one hand, he saw that Ambrose was already halfway through a large trencher of pork stew. As the guardians of knowledge, the maesters all ate well. "Archmaester, may I have a moment of your time?" Ambrose, a rather nondescript old man without any of the pompous arrogance of many in the conclave, smiled up at Sam before returning to his meal. "Not at all, Samwell." At several scoffs or snickers from the other men, he silenced them with a look. "Ignore these old crones." A chuckle escaped the self-deprecating joke. "Tell me your piece." Clearing his throat, Sam placed a volume in front of Ambrose, pushing his trencher to the side. "This is the epic poem of Timon of Braavos, the Ballad of the First Men. It's one of the only extant texts describing the White Walkers and the Long Night." "Fairy tales, Archmaester Sargons looked at him with a cocked eyebrow, smile stretching out over his fleshy face. He was quite obese, even fatter than Sam before the Night's Watch. A wave of Ambrose's hands caused him to shake his head and go back to his eating. "Go on, Sam." "There's a passage in here, one I have heard in passing in other ancient texts." Sam ran along the scroll with his finger. "And the demon of ice brought forth the heavens upon the earth. This great fall shrouded the world in an everlasting darkness, a deluge of ice and snow, as if from the coldest of all hells. While I've read bits and pieces of the great fall, this is the only source that hints at some kind of astronomical cause." Ambrose pursed his lips. "Very astute, Tarly. If you would like, you can access our observatory. Maester Gorgas has quite the strides in optical design." "It isn't just that." Sam had made this point before, and was dead set on hounding the stoogy old men until they gave in. "The Long Night is closer to returning as ever before. Emperor John needs the assistance of the College of Maesters and their clout with the population to properly mobilize the realm in order to combat the threat." Turning his torso towards Sam, the Archmaester rubbed his beard. "Young Samwell, as representative of one of the claimants to the throne of Westeros, you have every right to be here and have access to our facilities. However, the Citadel has not stood the test of time since the centuries before the conquest by taking sides in succession disputes." "But Archmaester, with the threat facing us—" "We survived the conquest. We survived the Blackfire rebellions. We survived Robert's rebellion simply for this fact. If Emperor John and Empress Daenerys defeat Joffrey and take the Iron Throne, then consider us at their service. But until then, our previous policy stands." Sighing in defeat, Sam grabbed the 3 books, tucking them under his arm, and made for the exit to the mess. The clunk of the door shutting behind Sam, one of the maester, droplets of stew dropping from his wooden spoon, looked up. "Is that the Tarly boy?" "Aye," said Ambrose, not without some pride. "Smart lad. Has his head in the clouds a bit, plus an immense loyalty to the Emperor John, but a zest for knowledge. Reminds me of myself at his age. Isn't he the one whose father died at the Battle of Highgarden? Word travelled fast, largely on the quick thinking of the Maester of Highgarden. The hope among the Citadel was to interview enough first-person accounts to patch together a definitive history of the titanic clash. Taking on a giant, no less. Killing a giant, no less. Buys lonesome. An older Archmaester chuckled. Samuel can't be too distraught from it. He's now a lord in the favour of the Emperor. All with that pretty girl of his. Has everything he could ever want. Archmaester Ebros frowned, sighing. I haven't had the heart to tell him yet. The Lord of Hornhill or not, I couldn't break his spirit like that. Line break. All highest. Joffrey looked down from the perch in his private audience room as his cousin Lancel entered. With Qyburn assisting with the siege preparations, the number 2 among the Faith Militant had taken to acting as the king's majordomo. Captain Dario Naharis seeks your audience. A grin spread across the king's face. Good. Send him in. As Lancel left, he flopped down his gilded lesser throne. It would take several minutes before the enforcer could make it through the various security stops Baelish had ordered to protect the Red Keep from infiltration. He hummed a little ditty. Everything was coming up in his favour. Pride goeth before the fall, my king. Joffrey's mouth flopped open like a fish, breathing rapidly but struck mute by the haunting blue eyes. A glowing ice blue. The entirety of the north bearing down upon him in a single gaze. The audience hall chilled to almost frostbite. While all past visions had been of his father, or included his father, now only Ned Stark stood in front of him, neck barely resting on his shoulders. You! I killed you! You're dead! You can't be here! Demon brought upon this earth, to who the chosen will see. Blood poured from his neck, pooling on the floor. The foretold shall pass. The gods' justice will be. I am the chosen of the 7! Joffrey screamed, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. Hand of the warriors sent to save this realm! Ned Stark did not heed his demand. Son of your former, beware his call. The Stormborn sees thy eyes, thy reign will fall. The mark! Stormborn? It clicked in his mind. Daenerys Stormborn! She must never see me! On female flesh, his sigil doth enjoyed. The demon still poured blood, blue glow almost blinding. Joffrey's eyes snapped shut, eyes clasping over his ears. It didn't help. One king it crowns, one king destroyed. No! His eyes flew open, only for the room to be empty. No blood, no chill, no sign that Ned Stark's demon had ever been there. All that could be heard was the flicker of torchlight and the sound of his heavy breaths and thumping heart. Only for him to hear, and the lone servant resting in a dark alcove, unseen as if she were draped in the same blindness in her eyes. Arya heard the door to the audience hall open, booted feet clicking on the stone floor as someone approached the true demon's throne. All highest, her teeth gritted. Naharis. He had climbed to the second on her list, just after Joffrey. The capture of Sansa Stark and the Dragon Queen was successful beyond all wildest dreams. Arya's eyes widened. The fucker had actually done it! Dany and Sansa were in the Red Keep! How did you accomplish it? Everyone was drinking and carousing. After such a defeat, no one expected someone to be so bold. He reached into his haversack, pulling out Saracen. Queen Daenerys' blade, presented to your highest as a token of your greatness. He set it on the stone before him. I shall see to it that they are brought before you as soon as possible. You will not! Joffrey screamed. Get out, Naharis! I may see Sansa at a later date, but never the dragon bitch. She stays locked up. Do you hear me? The rest of the words, and Naharis scurrying out, didn't register to Arya. All her desires focused on getting to her sisters, but all her instincts said the opposite. She fought the human reactions. They would be fine on their own. John and Rob to worry about them. She had her own agenda to accomplish. Line break. Bastard of Winterfell, we have your whore and your whore sister. They are safe, for now. Bend the knee to me, the divine chimera, born of the womb of the mother, or they will die by my enjoyment. His Highest Joffrey, first of his name. You can tell it's him, Tyrion sighed, dropping the letter that he had read to the Imperial War Council. Can barely write worth a damn. Even Ramsay could scrawl legibly, said Rob, scowl on his face. Now what do we do? We need to besiege King's Landing now, Rob demanded, pointing at the capital on the map table. They have no army, and we can likely double our own active forces with the Lannister banners bending the knee to the Emperor. Without Highgarden's food stores, they'll riot within a week. Yazanzo Garaz rolled his eyes. We just fought a massive battle. Barely 10,000 of our army are ready to march anywhere, let alone besiege a city of over 1 million souls. Ironic, Tyrion laughed. Our army weak from victory. And through this, we were supposed to bring Joffrey's doom. Joffrey caused his own doom. In strode the Red Woman, lips set in a determined smile. Mira wheeled in Bran behind her. His desperation belays the hole the unholy demon has excavated for himself. Marjorie looked confused, huge belly confining her in her chair. I'm confused. How has he destroyed himself? Despite his anger, Rob hadn't strayed far from her side. Burned his own sister alive, drawled Bronn, scrunching his nose in disgust. Everyone I talked to wanted to fucking roast him alive for that. Lost all support not obtained by fear, or respect for his grandfather. That is not all. All attention was directed to Bran. The young Stark barely spoke, often found in the corner of any room or by a window, just observing. When he did, people paid attention. The ritual failed because Joffrey is the child of Queen Cersei and her brother, Sir Jaime. One could hear a pin drop. Come again, said Edmure Tully. Tyrion was silent. He had first-hand knowledge, but Bran didn't disclose it for reasons only known to him. I see everything, and I have recently seen proof. It explains why my father was killed. He and Stannis found that Jon Arryn had discovered Joffrey to be a Lannister. The seed is strong. All Baratheons are black of hair. As he told me when he visited me at the Smith all those years ago. Gendry mused aloud. He turned angrily to Tyrion. Did you know about this? The imp held his face in his hands. I had my suspicions, but I had no idea Joffrey wasn't Robert's. Bullshit. At best you were willingly blind, Robb yelled. Melisandre smirked. The ritual needed king's blood. Targaryen blood. Robert's grandmother was a Targaryen, so any child of his would have worked. Marcella wasn't his, so the ritual upset the Lord of Light enough to grant his majesty a victory. She took a seat next to Bran. It is rather poetic in a way. Wonderful, Robb laughed sarcastically. Just wonderful. My father died, the Seven Kingdoms plunged into war, and that little shit on the Iron Throne instead of my brother, all for fucking nothing. Muttered profanities indicated the table agreed with him. Davos weighed the ideas in his head. We can't spread the news. Get the Citadel to confirm and have the Ravens everywhere by tomorrow. Destroy Joffrey's legitimacy and spark a revolt. There is no time. The room shut up as Jon spoke. Sir Barristan, what is the fastest heavy unit in our army? One that could fight properly in King's Landing. Blinking, Barristan quickly composed himself. I would suggest Gendry Baratheon's forces, and your hoplites. The fastest would likely be the Golden Company, minus Mammoth, but their loyalty to their new sovereign is questionable at best. My men are loyal to more than just gold. Strickland, included for the purpose of this meeting at the request of the Emperor. He had met with each of the captured enemy commanders to gauge their alliance to him. Was quick to defend his honour. "We bend the knee to His Majesty freely." Dain scoffed. "Since when do you fight for anything but gold?" "Since an army of dead men will run roughshod over the entire continent without those under the Imperial banner." John had had enough. "Shut it! Start preparations. Gendry, Podrick and Strickland will march for King's Landing at all haste, but camp out of sight of the walls." His order was non-negotiable. "Forgive me," Tyrion spoke, attempting to negotiate all the same. "But what is this about, Your Majesty? It would take more than just a few thousand men to fully fortify a city." "Perhaps we should do what Joffrey wants." The words of the quiet, until now, Emperor struck the council like Robert Baratheon's famous warhammer. Men and women alike were stunned. No idea of what Jon was suggesting. Mouth agape, Tyrion stared at the young Emperor. "Surely you can't be!" Jon had surprised him greatly. And yet there was still so much of Ned Stark. So honourable. A man that would sacrifice himself for the ones he loved. Yet Ned Stark had surprised him. "Is this some kind of ambush tactic?" "Queen Daenerys cannot burn," Grey Worm stated. "Lure Joffrey to Dragon's Pit to meet Emperor alone. Then unleash the dragons. The Emperor and Empress cannot burn." "But my sister can, you cockless fuck," Robb hissed. "We are not burning the Hand of the North." "We cannot bring the dragons," Jon said firmly. "The defences in the capital would rip them to shreds. I promise you that. At least not yet." Suddenly he slammed his fist onto the table, face tightening in concealed rage. His lips quivered, a tempest within between the dragon fire threatening to be released and the ice struggling to cool it. "Father," he began, speaking slowly, "Ned Stark taught me to never champion one's laurels, that a man lets his deeds speak for him. I hope my deeds speak for me." Robb stood up, striding over to him. "They do, brother." Jon raised his hand, stopping him. "Please, brother." Taking a deep breath, he did his best to control the dragon blood within him. "I was the youngest Lord Commander of the Night's Watch in generations. I brought the wildlings south of the wall. United all of Westeros behind my banners on the field of battle. I have fought enemies from Yunkai to Hardhome. Braved the greatest trials and struggles any man born since the Lightbringer himself." Eyes scrunching shut, they opened in an instant, stormy grey, burning with the Targaryen fire. "I will be damned if I let a fucking bastard weakling usurper produced of incest to touch a hair on my family's head." Relief at the fire in the Dragon Emperor's tone morphed back into worried anticipation. Jon hadn't told anyone his plan after all. "While I'm always in the mood for killing some fucking pricks," Tolman broke the silence, "but how are we gonna fucking do it, Emperor Crow?" "Joffrey will not leave King's Landing." Bronn was the last one to be there. He'd know. "He has no need. All snug in the Red Keep. He can wait us out." Nodding, Jon walked towards the window. He could see his dragons resting in the fields. "Dany risked her life, and the life of our children, to save mine. More than once. I would not be worthy of my father's legacy if I wouldn't do the same for her." Jon turned, and the council was greeted by the ghost of a smirk, one backed up with pure savagery. "Joffrey wants me to go to King's Landing." He raised his hands till they were parallel to the ground. "Let's give him exactly what he wants." The Emperor had to be enjoying the awkward silences he was delivering in his council. Line break. "Frankly, I expected far worse." Rubbing her stomach soothingly, Daenerys willed the bland but plentiful food to remain inside. She rested upon a threadbare couch in the dimly lit room, a chamber pot filled with the heaved contents of her breakfast. It was dingy compared to the luxury of places such as Riverrun, Highgarden or Marine, but aside from the lack of sufficient light, it passed muster for comfort. Wetting a rag in a wash basin, Sansa brought it forth to place it on her sister's forehead. "Joffrey needs us. We're obviously his hostages. He may humiliate us and hurt us." An image of Sir Meryn beating her with the flat of his sword while ripping her dress at the king's instigation flashed in her mind. Sansa clenched her fists. "But killing us eliminates all his leverage." Feeling the gurgle in her stomach, Dany groaned herself. Please, little one, calm down. Gods, she wished John was here. She wished she had her sword and her dragon so she could burn the entire capital city to the ground. But John kept keep them away from the massive air defences. As he should. Then why hasn't he even given us an audience? A wry smile formed on her lips. Too frightened by those that vanquished his army? A chuckle left Sansa's lips. While that would be satisfying, I can't possibly be sure. She ran a hand down her face. Before, he was quite superficial. His gluttony and bloodlust ruled him. Now, the madness grips him. He is unpredictable. Just like my father. Sansa turned to look at her sister. You are not him, Daenerys. If Joffrey is what madness is, then the word holds no meaning to you. Nevertheless, Dany turned away. A conqueror, a dragon rider, vanquished by morning sickness? No doubt Arya would have teased her incessantly over it. All one little pack. The pack sticks together. The pack survives. I have a confession to make. When you arrived at Winterfell, even saving our army, I did not trust you. I thought you were a threat. Groaning from the discomfort, Dany turned to look at her sister. Understandable. I am a Targaryen, after all. No. It was wrong. Knowing the truth about Jon's, it went unsaid, and what Robb told me about how in love you were. Still, the North remembers, and the long-held memories of the Mad King, and the lies of Rhaegar and Lyanna, they stuck longer than they should have. I know you are not your father, Daenerys. She chuckled dryly. You are far prettier. Sansa watched as Dany's eyebrow rose. Part of me hoped Jon's mind wasn't clouded, that you weren't using him, she smiled. I am happy that I was proven wrong, that the pack has a new sister. As Dany tried to smile, suddenly her face turned green and she grabbed the chamber pot, causing Sansa to leap up and turn away, giving her her privacy. Gliding along the stone floors, everything felt surreal for Sansa. The nature of the capital city hadn't changed since she had last left King's Landing. There was still the stench of death, the cacophony of back-breaking labour, and the very aura of malevolence. The former two had only been amplified, the malevolence still there, draped over everything. It had started the day Sansa had learnt her father was in chains, and she suspected that in the years since she left, it remained to this very moment. As she gazed out of the window, a sense of déjà vu, gut-wrenching, painful déjà vu, washed over her. Lining the entire outer wall of the Red Keep were several speared heads, mounted on pikes for the entire city to see. Looking out upon the city, row upon row of punished slaves filled the various courtyards, tied to poles and garroted. Daario taking care of loose ends upon his return. If King's Landing were to be put under siege, then upon returning the King's enforcer needed to cow the populace, not to mention satiating Joffrey's sadism. Unlike the last time, shrinking away from Ned Stark's head mounted on the pike, Sansa stared straight ahead. She was no mere girl, romantic hope stashed away by the unholy demon made flesh. She was the hand of the Targaryen Emperor, a survivor. Sansa glanced over to Daenerys, the sounds of her retching filling the room. Come hells or high water, they would survive this. Line break. You want passage to Old Town? Expression flat, Jaime nodded, along with 2 large crates to be filled with supplies. Wet, hacking cough racked the bow-legged form of the Grand Maester Pycelle. May I ask why? I have consultations I need to make with the Archmaester concerning the progress of winter weather upon the city before the siege lines are set up. Jaime would have realised his story was bullshit if someone else had tried to peddle it. Pycelle, on the other hand, a raven could be intercepted by the Targaryens. The Maester shuffled around his office in the cellar of the Red Keep. What makes you think I could obtain such a passage? Pycelle asked, not even looking at Jamie as he rummaged among various elixirs and poultices that went into the hypochondriac and aching king. If I spent all my time within the walls of this palace covered in a shroud, barely moving, I'd need those fucking potions, Jamie thought bitterly. It wasn't a very paternal thought. The monster killed my child. Joffrey lost any paternal feeling Jamie ever had for him the moment he had burned Marcella alive. Jamie grabbed the shoulders of the bony old man and turned him around. Because his divine highest needs the medicines provided to him by the maesters of the citadel in order for him to be well and carry on the work of the Seven. He met the maester's cloudy gaze. And I know you have a fast caravel that runs between the Targaryen blockades. It leaves in 1 week. Based on the look in Pycelle's eyes, he seemed both hesitant and nervous. I do not know if this is appropriate. Having planned for this, Jamie withdrew a purse from his belt and pulled open the drawstring. A clinking sound filled the room. House Lannister would greatly appreciate your cooperation, Grand Maester. He dropped the purse into Pycelle's hand, licking his lips at the gold coins sliding over each other quite deliciously in front of him. Pycelle's jowls jiggled as he nodded. Of course. I shall see to your vessel, Sir Jamie. Only the most important among us should consult with the maesters of Oldtown. With all due haste, Grand Maester, Jamie mused as they walked down the hallway, hand draped over the disgusting man's shoulder. With all due haste. Little did they both know that even in these walls, adorned with the bleached skulls of the dragons of Targaryen's past, had ears. Many sets. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that. Sorry for all the stumbling, it's been a week and a half, let me tell you that. But, wow, okay, things are intense. I'm more surprised than anything that Dany and Sansa have such good accommodations. Kind of confused as to that. Anyway, what can you do? You guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe. Check out my other videos. Make sure to have a great day, night, wherever time zone you're in. Bye now guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!